What's going on, guys? It's Mikkel, and today we're talking about Twitter. Twitter is a platform I'm fairly new to, but one that I've really grown to love because it really turns every single one of its users into a valuable member of its platform. This is something I like to call network effects. Network effects are essentially where every single user adds value to the overall platform itself. Twitter allows every single one of its users to become a reporter, essentially, and report on information they want to share. I think this is very valuable because it disrupts traditional forms of media where they really control what they want you to hear. On Twitter, you can follow anyone you want and listen to the information they want to share, and really helps distribute information better to the mass public. The information is also essentially instantaneously, so I really think Twitter is the best news site out of all social media. News is something that's been around for centuries and pretty much since the beginning of time, and I think Twitter is currently the best form to get any kind of news. I mean, Twitter is a centralized platform, but it essentially creates decentralized groups on it to share information. Overall, I think Twitter's platform is becoming essentially a utility to society, and the more and more we see famous CEOs and companies utilizing it to break critical information, the more and more important Twitter becomes, and the overall importance it comes to the infrastructure of our current society. If you guys like this video and you want to hear more about Twitter, make sure you subscribe to my channel, you like this video, and you comment down below what you think of Twitter. So now let's jump into Twitter stock, because I think that plays an important part of the story as well, other than my overall enjoyment for their platform in general. So if we look at Twitter stock is essentially flat since its IPO. It had kind of a lull over the course of 2015 to 2019 where it really didn't do much. A big part of that is because Wall Street generally misunderstood the platform and really didn't have too much insight into social media itself. They really didn't understand Facebook for a long time until Facebook really started growing massive revenues and massive net income. I think Twitter will follow a very similar path to what Facebook did. I just think Twitter has taken a little longer to develop and really show, or for Wall Street to catch on to what they're doing. A massive thing Twitter just released is super followers, which will allow creators to monetize their channels and have people pay to see certain tweets or anything else. I think this is very important because currently what creators are doing is they're using things like Patreon or OnlyFans that remove people off the Twitter platform and have them pay their viewers on different platforms. I think the super followers will help keep viewers on the platform and help creators more easily monetize their work. I think this is really important because not only does this bring more value to creators, but it keeps more people on the Twitter platform, and also in the end will drive more revenue and income for Twitter. I think this is massive because in the past Twitter has had a massive problem monetizing their content. I think this is a great step forward and shows they're really working in the right direction. Let's go down here and we see that Twitter's revenue was up 74%. Their net income was up 104%, and their net profit margin was up 102%. They also are profitable, and I think that's important because I'm going to compare them to Snapchat right here to show you why I think they're actually undervalued. If we see right here, their market cap is only $50 billion, and if we look at something like Snapchat, they're actually trading at $115 billion. I really think social media platforms like Snapchat and Instagram, while they also have network effects, there's less valuable information being used on those platforms than there is on something like Twitter. You don't see a lot of CEOs or companies using those platforms to really communicate to their followers. It's really more all about visual entertainment. I think that's still very critical, but the only point I'm trying to make is I don't think Twitter should have half the market cap of something like Snapchat when the information they're providing might be more valuable in the long run. If we look at revenue and compare, they're actually making less revenue than Twitter currently, but growing it slightly faster. They also are not profitable, which I think is a massive tick down, and their net profit margins are actually they're increasing, but they're obviously negative because they're not making money. If we look at Twitter users, Twitter actually has 330 monthly active users, and Snapchat has 347 million monthly. Once again, Snapchat has them beat slightly, but we're looking at half the market cap on Twitter that's on Snapchat. Also, I don't know about you guys, but I personally think Twitter has much better staying power over the long run than Snapchat. I think at this point Twitter's already solidified itself as not being a fad. I think Snapchat is not a fad, but I think it still has the possibility to be disrupted a lot easier than things like Twitter. Twitter is pretty crucial already to how people communicate, and I don't think that's going to change. I think I think Apple could, if they introduced a feature that was similar to Snapchat, it could pull a lot of viewers or users away from Snapchat a lot easier than someone could create a new Twitter. That's more of my opinion, but I think it's something that's not too hard to see. Snapchat's user growth was about 23% last year, and Twitter's was 26%. I just think this continues to show that I'm surprised that Twitter's only valued at $50 billion versus Snapchat at $150 billion, $15 billion. When you look at these metrics and see they're really performing very similar, Snapchat might be growing a little faster, but Twitter's also profitable and probably has a more established platform. Overall, I can see Twitter making a push up similar to Snapchat to touch its valuation, probably putting Twitter near $100 a share. I think the more and more they start to drive up this net income, I think Wall Street's going to realize they could easily be a similar company to Facebook and slowly pile in before it becomes way too obvious, like Facebook is now, in my opinion. One thing I wanted to point out is that this is just a random NASDAQ article comparing Twitter to Snap, and it says both companies continue to find new ways to attract more users. I think that's really important because a lot of people, like, when I was comparing these platforms, I wasn't comparing what they were doing to each other. I was just comparing the overall valuation and how they probably should be valued closer to each other. But in the end, really every social media platform has its own purpose. Twitter is way different than Snapchat, way different than Instagram, and way different from Facebook. There's really not too many platforms like Twitter, and it's going to be so hard for them at this point to catch up to what Twitter's been doing because everyone's already on Twitter and everyone's already built their follower base. No one's going to give up their following base to try to restart that on another platform because following bases are worth so much money. It's really network effects, and no one wants to ruin their own personal network effects. When you add up all these networks together, it creates one massive one, and that's currently what's going on with Twitter. It's going to be extremely hard to disrupt, and I don't think the market necessarily has fully valued what Twitter has created. I think that will come in time, but I think for now, I actually am seeing a pretty good opportunity of buying Twitter. I wish I realized this earlier when it was back in the 40s, but in the end, I still think it's drastically overvalued, so I'm not too upset about it. Twitter is a position that I would like to add alongside ARK. ARK Invest has currently been buying Twitter stock, and it doesn't look like they have any plans to dump it anytime soon. Twitter is currently the 19th biggest position in ARKK, and I think they're probably seeing a very similar thing that I am, because I don't see Snap anywhere in their top 30. Actually, I am kind of curious. Let's just do a thing for Snap Rail here. Yeah, they don't own Snap, and not that ARK knows all when it comes to this stuff, but it doesn't look like they have Snap or Facebook in any of their funds. They do have Facebook, but 77. Let's see if they have Snap. We were just looking at ARK. They do have Snap, 79. So they are most bullish on Twitter. I am too. I like all these platforms, but in terms of an investment opportunity, I think people are going to start catching on to Twitter pretty quick. As a user myself, I love Twitter. I get so much great information on Twitter that I would never find anywhere else. The only other place that really rivals Twitter in terms of their news is really YouTube, but they're really completely different purposes. Like, when you go onto YouTube, you're looking for a deep dive into something, kind of like what I'm doing here on Twitter. When I'm doing here on Twitter Company. When you're on Twitter, you're really looking for quick bites of information that could really just give you the news of what's going on right now. Like I said, I think all these social media platforms really have their own purpose in society today, and I think they're all going to be worth massively more than they are now. Twitter's just one that I personally use the most, and therefore one that I feel confident building an investment in. Anyway, guys, though, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of Twitter stock. I don't see too many people talking about it on YouTube, so I just wanted to put it out here so you could see it. Anyway, guys, for now, Mikkel out.